The small roadside diner, nestled between rolling fields and quiet streets, seemed like the perfect place for a weary traveler to grab a bite. The aroma of sizzling bacon and freshly brewed coffee filled the air as Malcolm Davis stepped inside, his suitcase still in hand. He had been driving for hours and was eager to stretch his legs and enjoy a meal before continuing his journey. The bell above the door jingled as he entered, but instead of friendly smiles, Malcolm was met with curious stares. Conversations dipped into hushed whispers, forks paused halfway to mouths, and the once lively atmosphere dimmed with an air of tension. Malcolm had experienced moments like this before, subtle but heavy with unspoken words. He had long learned to push past discomfort, to focus on his purpose rather than the reactions of strangers. So, with a polite nod to the room, he walked toward an empty booth near the window and took a seat. A middle-aged waitress with graying blonde hair and a sharp, assessing gaze approached his table. Her name tag read Lisa. Her posture was stiff, and her lips pressed into a tight line as she pulled out a small notepad. "What can I get you?" she asked, her voice clipped and devoid of the usual warmth expected from a server. Malcolm glanced at the menu, ignoring the uneasy feeling creeping up his spine. "I'll have a country breakfast, eggs scrambled, bacon crispy with a side of toast and black coffee." Lisa jotted down his order but didn't move right away. Instead, she exhaled sharply, shaking her head as if something about this situation irked her. Malcolm met her gaze calmly, refusing to acknowledge the unspoken hostility in her stance. "That all?" she asked, her tone almost daring him to say more. "Yes, that'll be all." "Thank you," Malcolm replied evenly. Lisa walked away, her heels clicking against the linoleum floor, but not before muttering something under her breath. Malcolm wasn't entirely sure what she had said, but he noticed a woman sitting at the counter shift uncomfortably, her brows furrowing as she looked from Lisa to him. Ignoring the unease in the room, Malcolm turned his attention to his phone, checking his emails and messages. Outside, the midday sun cast golden light over the quiet street. It was a beautiful day, and he refused to let a few odd stares ruin his mood. A few minutes later, Lisa returned with his coffee, placing the cup on the table with a little too much force, causing some of the liquid to slosh over the rim. "Here," she said, then turned on her heel before he could thank her. Malcolm took a deep breath, stirring his coffee as he exhaled slowly. It was clear that he wasn't welcome here. But why? Was it simply because he was an unfamiliar face in a small town? Or was it something deeper? As he took a sip of his coffee, he reminded himself that he had every right to be here, just like anyone else. He wouldn't let prejudice dictate where he could or couldn't go. But something in the air told him that this meal wouldn't be as simple as he had hoped. And he was right. The tension in the diner thickened as Malcolm waited for his food. The clinking of utensils and the murmur of conversations resumed, but he could feel the occasional glances thrown in his direction. He ignored them, focusing instead on the aroma of fresh coffee and the golden sunlight streaming through the window. Lisa returned with his plate, setting it down with a loud clatter. "Here you go," she said, her voice laced with something bitter. Malcolm met her gaze and nodded. "Thank you." Instead of leaving, she lingered, arms crossed over her chest. "You passing through?" she asked, her tone making it clear the question wasn't born out of friendly curiosity. Malcolm wiped his hands with a napkin before responding. "Yeah, just taking a break before I get back on the road." Lisa scoffed. "Figures." He arched an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" She leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a near whisper, but loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Why don't you just go back to Africa?" The words struck like a slap, stunning Malcolm into silence. A heavy hush fell over the diner as every conversation, every clinking fork, came to a halt. The air turned electric with shock. A middle-aged woman at the counter gasped, her coffee cup pausing midair. A young couple in the corner exchanged uneasy glances. The elderly man in the booth near the door straightened, his expression unreadable. Malcolm slowly placed his fork down, his heartbeat steady but his mind racing. He had encountered racism before, but the sheer audacity of Lisa's words, spoken so openly, caught him off guard. Lisa, apparently emboldened by the silence, smirked. "What? Don't have anything to say?" She let out a dry chuckle. "Didn't think so." The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, before someone finally spoke. "That's enough, Lisa." The voice belonged to the elderly man near the door. His tone was firm, leaving no room for argument. "You've said your piece. Now apologize." Lisa's smirk faltered, but she scoffed. "Oh, come on, Bill. I was just joking." "That wasn't a joke," Bill shot back. "That was hate, and we don't stand for that here." The weight of the moment hung in the air, waiting for the next move. Malcolm, still composed but visibly affected, held Lisa's gaze. What happened next would change everything. The silence in the diner was thick, an invisible weight pressing down on everyone in the room. Lisa's face twisted in defiance, but the murmurs around her grew louder. The middle-aged woman at the counter, still holding her cup midair, finally set it down with a decisive clink. "Lisa, that was uncalled for," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "How dare you say something so hateful?" A younger man in a booth nearby shook his head. "Yeah, that was disgusting. You owe him an apology." Lisa's jaw clenched, her hands balling into fists. "Oh, come on. It was just words." "Words matter," Bill countered, his eyes dark with disappointment. "They shape how we treat each other. You crossed a line." Malcolm remained composed, but inside a storm brewed. He had dealt with racism before, but this was different. Here, strangers were standing up for him. Taking a deep breath, he finally spoke. "I don't need an apology," he said, "but I hope you realize how much damage words like that can do." Lisa faltered for the first time, her confidence cracking. The entire diner was watching her now, judgment clear in their eyes. Would she double down? Or would she finally realize the weight of her actions? Lisa's expression hardened, but the weight of the room bore down on her. She glanced around, searching for any sign of support, but the stony faces surrounding her offered none. Even her co-workers stood in silent disapproval. Bill, still seated near the door, crossed his arms. "Well, we're waiting." A long pause stretched between them before Lisa scoffed. "Fine. I'm sorry," she muttered, but her tone was anything but sincere. "Not good enough," the woman at the counter said. "Say it like you mean it." Lisa hesitated, but the judgmental glares left her no choice. Would she truly change, or was this just another hollow apology? Lisa swallowed hard, the heat of humiliation creeping up her neck. For the first time in years, she felt exposed, not as a tough, no-nonsense waitress, but as someone being held accountable. The silence in the diner stretched as she struggled with her next words. Finally, she sighed. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice clearer this time. "That was wrong of me." Malcolm studied her, searching for sincerity. The crowd waited. Would she mean it, or was this just another empty apology?